it says December 9th.
All right. So welcome everyone. Welcome to Water Wednesday. Happy Water Wednesday, everyone. My name is Caroline Warwick. I am a science communication specialist at the Mid-Florida Research Education Center for the University of Florida. And today we're talking about landscape design. So what Water Wednesdays is a webinar series about Florida's most precious natural resource, water. Every Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock Eastern Time, we live stream a 30-minute talk about Florida's water and what we can do to protect it. We host our webinar series on Zoom and do a broadcast to Facebook Live. If you're watching this from Facebook, please be aware of scammers. This webinar series is free, and do not click any links that are not posted by the admin, if you don't mind. So we do have a theme for every month. This month is Florida Friendly Landscaping Month. I will post a link below in the chat if you would like to learn the 9 principles of Florida Friendly Landscaping. Today, my colleague, our Florida Friendly Landscaping agent from Seminole County, Miss Tina McIntyre, is here to tell us some basics about landscape design. So let's welcome Tina, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
All right. Thank you so much, Carolyn. If you could enable screen sharing for me, I will go ahead and get us started with landscape design. So like she said, we're in the theme of Florida friendly landscaping. And since we are very international today, you might not know what that is, but essentially it's a water quality and water quantity program. We want to protect our natural resources, and everybody has a part in that by selecting plants that are Florida friendly. And, you know, we want to select plants that are also for the enjoyment of the homeowner, the neighborhood, and, you know, ultimately everyone in the neighborhood. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share here. All right. So I'm Tina McIntyre. I'm Florida Friendly Landscaping Agent with the University of Florida IFAS Extension in Seminole County. And we'll go ahead and get started. So like I said, today we're going to cover those 9 Florida friendly principles. And this actually is in Florida law. So people are able to go ahead and implement Florida friendly landscaping in their yards without any obstructions or restrictions. Now, if you live in an HOA, you do need to get their permission for the design that you ultimately select. We're also going to cover landscape principles and elements, and then ultimately get you starting to plan your landscape. So I talked a little bit about Florida friendly, or we call it FFL. It's to protect our natural resources. We want to conserve that water that we use from the aquifer. You know, we use it on our landscapes. About 50% of the home water use is on the landscape. And so we really want to be sure that we're applying the proper amount and selecting plants that are water wise. We also want to reduce pollution going into our waterways and our estuaries, our lakes, rivers, and streams, because nutrients such as synthetic fertilizers can harm our environment. So that's really what the Florida Friendly program is all about, and it's delivered through these 9 principles. So it starts with the right plant in the right place. We want to make sure that we're using the evolutionary history of the plant. You know, if it's a plant from an aquatic environment, we want to be sure to put it in an aquatic environment so it'll succeed. And if it's likes dry landscapes, you know, the same. So we won't dive into the plants today, but we're going to kind of talk about some of these concepts, you know, and how to really design your landscape to be optimal and mimic the ecology of nature. So some of our design practices, you know, that could be called out as Florida friendly: planting trees for shade. You know, this is going to help kind of create landscapes under the tree. If you select such as a pine or pine tree, It might make a self-mulching area where you can use those leaves as mulch. And then, trying to shade your air conditioning unit. So here in Florida, it gets very hot. Most of us have those air conditioner units, and we want to make sure that we're not getting too close, but using plants and vegetation to cool those units. So we want to plan that out. Thinking about the flow of water over your property. That's a big one that we'll talk about today. Do you have gutters? Is there erosion? Is there an area where it washes out? Is there an area that it does not percolate down and there's standing water? And so, those are some of the concepts that we think about in maybe installing a rain garden. Attracting wildlife, that's its own Florida-friendly principle. So we want to make sure that we're selecting plants that are not only hardy and great for the landscape, but that are also going to support wildlife. So our bees, our pollinators, our butterflies, our birds, of course, and even our small mammals and bats, and that kind of create that food web going up. Specialty gardens, so we'll talk more about that later, but there's lots of themed gardens that you can choose from. Thinking about grouping your plants by the water needs. So if you want to have a more dry area of the landscape, thinking about selecting plants that are going to be hardy for that area. And having a practical lawn area. So, if you have a lot of turf, maybe thinking about creating a more robust landscape, circle in the middle or bumping out those landscape beds to be able to have a sustainable landscape bed. Vertical layering. So thinking about how the plants, in a natural ecosystem, you have your ground covers, your shrubs, your trees, and, the canopy ultimately, and everything in between. And we want to mimic that again, in our landscape design. And then mulching. Mulching is its own Florida friendly principle. We want to make sure that we're using mulch, which really helps our trees and shrubs. So looking at this, a lot of us move into communities where, the sod is laid and now we own the house, or maybe we're renting, and this could be considered a blank canvas. So we want to kind of create habitat here. We want to, select shrubs that are going to, have some design and lushness to them. So those flowers are blooming and increasing property values as well. So the first step is kind of getting inspired. So, you can see here, I've selected just a few ideas to create, certain feels. So here at the top left, it's almost like a secret garden that you want to lead back to. This takes time. I will tell you, I've done this class several times, and it can be a little overwhelming for some people because, you want to do it all at once. And I know this phase when you're getting inspired, when maybe you're going on different apps to look up images, or, going on the internet to see, to say what you want to do, just think about that. It's okay to do this, eat the elephant one bite at a time, like they say. So you're not going to do it all in one day. Although we did do that on Flip My Florida Yard, which will be coming up in April, but that is quite a team. And, so you want to kind of get inspired, but don't get overwhelmed. Look at images and see, just recognize that this is a process that could take some time. If you're like me, where, you're kind of moving through it as you're able to. But some ideas to get inspired, we have informal and formal gardens. So a formal garden might be something that, where people have weddings and events and banquets, and, everything's kind of straight lines and really trains the eye to look forward. And we'll talk about these concepts. Informal might be more, curvy lines and, maybe different colors and variations. Rock gardens. So Florida friendly, we don't actually recommend using rocks exclusively in the landscape. So you don't want to just be putting, somebody's having issues with the slides. I'll just stop share real quick and go back here. Hopefully that fixed it for you, Jane. Sorry. So, we don't recommend exclusive rocks, but you can utilize rocks in the landscape. Now, they're not going to provide as much benefit as that mulch, because mulch holds water and really does help to bring organic material, but rocks can be a nice addition to the landscape. Potted gardens are a great option for people who live in apartments or have balconies. Again, I talked about the secret garden that kind of has a little closure and feel to it. Of course, I love those edible gardens and landscapes and planting fruit trees. That can be a really fun one and can be done in a Florida-friendly way as well. Cultural gardens, if you love to cook with herbs and, your heritage is from a certain part of the world, thinking about what plants, are great for, you and either spiritually or maybe culinarily. So, thinking about a cultural garden. Succulents and cacti. So if you have a real dry spot, this could be a good addition. Now, again, we don't recommend just rocks and just, xeriscaping, but this could be a good addition to a landscape. Vegetable gardens, your butterfly gardens, herb gardens, wildlife gardens, and we do whole classes on that. I believe I have one coming up in March or April to think about, what will support that food web moving up, to draw in the insects and draw in the birds of prey and all the great wildlife that we have here in Florida. A whimsical garden, that could be something with soft vegetation, wispy grasses and such, and collection garden. So that could be a rose garden or daylilies. I know they're active in Seminole County. We have a lot of people that are interested in daylilies. And then a wildflower garden. So there's a lot. And, just thinking about what you like will really help to kind of move the project along. But before, you kind of go to the nursery or the store and make that purchase, you want to think about the landscape design portion. Because, we all get drawn into the beautiful blooms and the beautiful colors. But before we make that impulse buy, we want to do some, thought processes. So what I recommend is bringing out your survey. If you bought a house, you probably were provided a survey of the property, where the property lines are, and, put that on your graph paper. When we do this class in person, we have graph paper, we have people bring their surveys, they're getting the pencils out, getting the rulers out. And I really do recommend that. We'll have a little quick one at the end where we can get those ideas flowing. But some things that you'll want to consider is, again, the flow of water on your property. Here in Florida, we have the rainy season during the summer, as do, I saw somebody from the Philippines. So the typhoon season, we want to be sure that we're addressing the water and thinking about how it moves over our property. It's going to be very different throughout. Still seeing that the slides are blurry. Carolyn, I don't know if on my end it does look good, but sometimes to the Facebook, maybe it's distracting. My apologies, everyone. And then, we really say the landscape trifecta. So we want function. That's really important. The environment, that's another critical issue. We have people coming for tourism to Florida every day. And so we want to make sure that we're preserving our environment. And sorry, the slides seem to be resolving themselves, hopefully. And then aesthetics, increasing property values, keeping that neighborhood cultural feel. So these are things to consider on the micro and macro level. So when we think about principles and the basic concepts of landscape design, we're going to run through these, but it's portion, scale, balance, rhythm, dominance, and contrast. And these are just things to kind of consider as you're planning your landscape. So diving in with proportions, you want to think about balancing the landscape and how things might look proportionate to your house. So it's going to have a feel. So in this picture on the left, we have one tree is kind of small, the other tree is really tall. Not only does this feel out of balance, but it's not proportional because the house is smaller. So here on the right, it's kind of the opposite problem. The tree is wrong plant, wrong place. It's just so big, it's smothering the house. So we want to think about, how large is this plant going to get? And again, when we go to the store, we have those impulse buys. We don't necessarily think, okay, this plant's going to get 10 feet wide and 20 feet tall, or 30 feet wide and 50 feet tall. And so, you just want to put something in and be done with it. But it's really critical because you could be planting a headache, such as the picture on the right. That is going to invite wildlife into the house, create rubbing and really hurt their gutters and create a maintenance issue. So thinking about the mature height and width of the plant is really important. Scale, so thinking about things that you already have in your landscape. Are they small? Are they big? What's the feel of your landscape currently? And how can we enhance the scale and the feel and the relationship of things that we could potentially add? So if you're thinking about making a purchase of some benches, of some planters, making sure that is going to feel adequate to the current size and shape and feel of your landscape. Balance. So balance doesn't necessarily also mean symmetry. And I think that's kind of cool because things can be symmetrical, like if you are going for a formal garden look, but if it's asymmetrical, it can still be balanced. So for example, here in the top image, we have a symmetrical landscape. So it's literally 1-to-1, 1-to-1, so we have the balanced shrubs, the balanced kind of small trees on the side, and the balanced ground cover, a very, triangular shape there at the top coming down. And on the bottom, we still have balance, but it's not asymmetrical, or sorry, it's not symmetrical. So we have a different shrub on the left, a different shrub on the right. And for me personally, I like the asymmetry because it still has the balance feel, but then I can have more species and more types of flowers and more types of things. And you can do this asymmetry or symmetry with, actual size, shape, and texture. You can do it with color. There's a lot of ways that you can create that balance. And then rhythm. So there is a certain rhythm that can be created in the landscape, and this can change as our seasons change. Florida, we tend to, in our natural areas, have a lot of blooming going on in the fall and the spring, but a lot of our horticultural species will bloom throughout the summer. So you might have different rhythms that occur as the seasons change. And rhythm can be created by, color. It's something that really has repetition in the landscape. So you can see here on the left, we're creating a rhythm with this pink. As it blooms throughout the landscape, it precedes you down the path. And even the grasses kind of help to enhance that rhythm. And then on the right, it's almost, musical as your eye goes through the picture. So it kind of is a focal point as, you're moving through the landscape and creates that harmony. Dominance. So dominance is something bold, and it doesn't have to be vegetation. It can be a beautiful specimen tree or, a elder plant in the garden, or it can be a synthetic man-made structure. So here on the left, we have this pergola, which creates a dominant feature in the landscape. And then on the right, we have these red planters that are also kind of draw your eye to that area of the garden. It's almost like an accent to the current landscape. So you don't want just, a pergola. For example, on the left, if we didn't have the beautiful, blooming plants and the grasses around it, it might not be as, fitting. And so we want to make sure that we're complementing those dominant aspects of our landscape. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll, if we don't get to them as we go, put them at the end. And then finally, our last principle is contrast. So contrast can be hard to achieve in the landscape, but it really can help to create depth and texture. So here you can see this red line of blooms going on in the middle of the landscape, very contrasting. And this could be something that occurs only in the springtime, maybe, you know, or maybe as fall approaches, these bloom, and it's going to create that contrasting element. Or you can do it also with texture. So thinking about, you know, how the grasses might provide a whimsical look in the background to something that's a more creeping and crawling ground cover. Now, you do want to be careful and be very judicious of how you select your contrast and your dominance, because with too much, it can create a little bit of confusion in the landscape. So moving right along, here's kind of how we recommend going through the process of planning your landscape. You want to start with developing a site plan. Then you're going to take inventory of your current site. So you're going to think about, you know, those site conditions and write down, you know, like I said, how does the water flow? Do you have pooling of water? Then you're going to move on to your needs, and you're going to think about what are your needs and meeting those, you know, the really important parts and the functions of your landscape. You know, do you have dogs? Do you have children? You know, what is the goal that, you know, you want to use the space for? Locate those use areas, develop use areas, and then get to planting. So you can see there's a lot that we recommend before, again, those impulse buys. So some other things to consider as you're starting off is, you know, does your area have irrigation laws or rules? So we are located in Seminole County, which is part of the St. Johns River Water Management District. And we are only allowed to water one time in the daylight savings time. So right now, you know, through March, we're only allowed to irrigate one time per week and on specific days. So, you know, again, this is a worldwide broadcast, but, you know, just thinking about, are there irrigation restrictions that might inhibit you from planting certain species? Maybe there's fertilizer restrictions. You know, if so, maybe selecting more native species or species that might not need as much fertilizer. So like I said, here in Seminole County, we have restrictions for fertilizer use, and we cannot fertilize with nitrogen or phosphorus during the summertime. So, you know, there's certain restrictions around that. Do you need some lakefront permits? Is it a lakefront area where, you know, you need to make sure you're pulling permits to put in some aquatic native enhancements? Then thinking about your neighbors and your neighborhood, you know, do you live in an HOA? Like I mentioned, the HOA has to allow you to do Florida friendly, but you still have to talk to them and get their approval for the design and the plant species that you're selecting. You know, they have to move you through, but you do have to kind of work with them. And so, you know, thinking about your neighborhood, keeping that neighborhood feel, and kind of working with that to get what you also desire. In Florida, we have call 811, know before you dig. So you want to know about your utility lines, irrigation lines, and those kinds of things. So you don't put the shovel in and then, you know, you don't have internet. And we all need that right now. So just thinking about calling 811, know before you dig, they'll come out and flag those lines for you. Using the surveyors or building contractors plan if available. So like I said, you should all be provided a survey, and you can see this one here for an average Florida home. It kind of shows you the dimensions of the house, the property line, where the setbacks are, because we don't recommend planting in those right-of-way, medians, or common use areas, because technically they would be the jurisdiction of the municipality. And so I'd hate for you to spend a bunch of money and planning and design and then having, you know, that as an issue. And trying to be exact, you know, like I said, get some graph paper and have fun with it. Get those pencils out and, you know, be creative. So I'm going to just pull this over real quick. This is the activity that we actually utilize in our in-person class. And this is a lot of fun because I feel like it helps us better understand our site assessment with our site needs. And so when we're talking about site assessment, we want to think about the existing traits of our landscape. So is it a full sun or a full shade environment? Is it a wet area? Is there already a large shade tree that we don't recommend removing because you can't based on the city ordinance? These are parameters that you have to work with. Unless you have all the money in the world to regrade your site or whatnot, you really want to think about where your gutter points are. Are you close to a lake or a stormwater pond? Do you have an air conditioner or maybe a generator that you're trying to hide? These are some things that you want to, think about as you're planning your landscape. And then thinking about your site needs. So again, these are what you desire, what you want, based on your current, family and living dynamic. So, do you want a sandbox for your kid? Do you want a fire pit? Do you want a path to kind of weave you over to those trash cans or that compost bin that you're weaving in? Do you have pets? Do you want to screen your neighbor's very bright light? Maybe they have some very bright floodlights that come over into your house, and you want to try to block those out. These are some of the desires and some of the needs. And then what you want to do after you've kind of put these two columns side by side, maybe start connecting some. You might not be able to connect all of them, but for example, a full sun area might be great for pets. And this will really kind of help you think about, aligning those site assessments with your needs. So again, just to reiterate some aspects of that site analysis, thinking about the wind direction or microclimates. Maybe you're in an urban area that's a little bit warmer than, out east of the city, or maybe you're in a lake, next to a lake, and you do have that microclimate. Hardscapes, you might have a driveway and things you have to work around. Drainage, again, that's a huge one. Noise and light. House orientation, is it south facing, north facing? Just kind of thinking about all these elements to your site. And, again, water. So we have here some standing water. This would be a great place for a rain garden. What kind of soil do you have on site? Is it beautiful black, spongy compost like is shown here? Or is it just pure beach sand? And you're going to have that, for the plants to exist in. This is really going to drive your plant selection. So again, right plant, right place. Plant selected to suit a specific site will require minimal amounts of water, minimal amounts of fertilizer and pesticides. So, if we're selecting the right plant for the right place, they're going to thrive. And I will chat here in a minute the Florida Friendly Landscape Guide, which kind of walks you through some of these right plant, right place site parameters. We always want to keep in mind that invasive species are the wrong plant in the wrong place. So here we have our air potato vine, which creates, lots of problems for our state, smothers vegetation, and is a problem. So we always recommend removing invasive species, and we are launching a weed wrangle coming up next month. At the end of next month, our weed wrangle through our Central Florida SSMA, where we'll have prizes for Seminole County residents and lots of cool stuff to learn about invasive species. So check us out on our UF-IFAS Extension Seminole County Facebook page to learn more about that. And then again, your needs. So maybe you want a water feature in your area. Maybe you want a quiet sitting area that you can go outside and work remotely or, tend to some business. Having a deck, having an entertainment area where you want to have guests over when we all are able to do that. Adding color, these are things that you can think about, that these are your desires and ultimately, your needs, some of which might be your wants, some of which, might be needs that we definitely have to do. So, kind of thinking about our site traits, and again, I will post the book that we can utilize. And then moving along to locate those use areas. So you might say, okay, we know that the front yard is full sun, and so that's where we're probably going to put the pet area. The side yards are great for pathways. We're going to put the trash can and the compost right over there. And it might change over time, as your needs change and as your site might change. You might have a neighbor that comes in and does different things. So, is an evolving process. But you want to try to locate those use areas and then start to develop the use areas. So once you say, okay, this is going to be, the pet area, we know we want some kind of ground cover, it is full sun. Then we want to talk about, okay, which species of turf or ground covers might be suitable for this area. After you do a pH test, which I definitely recommend, then you would also know, okay, these plants are a no-go because the pH is this, and you start to whittle that list down and develop these use areas so you know which plants are starting to come to the top. If we all want a big, beautiful, Tababuya or jacaranda tree, but we just don't have the space, then we might have to rethink some of these desires and needs with our site use area. And that's why, I think it's kind of a compromise between your site area and your assessment and your needs and your wants. So, again, when you're thinking about developing those areas, we want to group plants by the water needs, using irrigation more efficiently. We only have so much water in our aquifer, in our freshwater aquifer. And so we want to make sure that we're selecting micro irrigation, we're properly using our irrigation, and selecting plants that are drought tolerant. So micro irrigation is really great for our landscape beds. It applies water directly to that root zone, and there's less water, lost to evaporation, like with our big rotors, sprayers. So just something to consider. And then finally, being able to develop a full planting plan. And, here you can see from the top perspective, it's kind of a bird's eye view looking down. We can see, okay, this tree, this is basically a tree here that's going to get so big. So this vision looks out, 10, 20 years, which, is ultimately, how to plan a landscape. It's not necessarily going and getting that impulse buy, but it's thinking, where do we want to be in 20 years? Do we want to be harvesting mangoes from these trees, which might shade a certain type of ground cover, and thinking into the future and how, again, this landscape will change over time. Another thing to consider is perennials versus annuals. So annual plants will live for 1 year, thereabouts. They're going to produce seeds and then die, or maybe the climate becomes unsuitable, and so they'll just basically die to heat. And then perennials are going to live several years. And Florida friendly, perennials are a great choice because, again, they're going to be there for so much longer with several years of blooms and that kind of a thing. So with that, I will take any questions. I don't know, Carolyn, if we have some questions coming in from Facebook Live, but we also have for those of you joining us on Zoom, feel free to put any questions you have in the chat.
It looks like we don't have any Facebook questions, but we do have some in the chat. So Larissa would like to know, can you talk ideas for water runoff control?
Yeah, so that, like I said, that is a big one because you could have, gutters and flooding and things like that. So one thing you could think about is a French drain. If it's really bad, I mean, we do recommend gutters. They can be costly, but a lot of the times it can kind of help you to channel your, help you to channel your water into your landscape bed. So if you think about, your roof is a large capture tool. You put gutters on, you can direct those into rain barrels, you can direct it into rain gardens, you can direct it into your landscape and over your turf. We don't recommend, piping it out to the driveway or the road because that creates stormwater. And so working with that water, and if you are having drainage issues, maybe considering a French drain, which would be basically an underground trench that kind of starts to percolate things down into the aquifer. French drains should never be linked to the stormwater system. They should be, percolating down into recharging our aquifer. So those are some ideas. Great. I'm seeing all the questions here coming in.
It looks like, Tina, your next question is, how far away from the house should a Tabula tree be?
Yeah, so I am actually looking up right now our University of Florida Friendly Design Guide. And that's the book that I would like to chat out to all of you right now because, let me see. Because it actually will go over each and every tree that we recommend. Tree, shrub, shade tree, and it's just really great because it tells you the maximum width and the maximum height, if the plant is going to grow quick, if the plant is going to grow slow. And so I'm chatting it right now. And Carolyn, if you don't mind adding that to the Facebook for all our viewers there.
No problem.
And so I'll just share this real quick. Each of you are getting a link to this free book. And on page 31, it's a great start. So should be 31, let's see, 34, 33. So this is going to kind of walk you through, are you in North, South, or Central Florida, the cold hardiness zones, the pH recommendations, the drainage. And so if we look here, I don't know if I could find Taboo real quick, but basically, just to show you, for example, and you can pull up the Taboo at your leisure. But for example, here we have the first tree, which is red maple. So Acer rubrum. And you can see where this is suitable for. And then we see the height, maximum height of the red maple is going to be 35 to 80 feet tall with a spread of 25 to 35 feet. So it's going to give you a lot of information. This plant likes it dry. It likes it wet. It's very versatile. It doesn't like shade. It likes full sun. So, it kind of walks you through from trees, large trees, all the way down to ground covers. And with that link, you can look up any plant that you desire. It'll also, if it's not in there, then maybe it's not suitable for Florida. So just something to consider.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It looks like our next question is, do you know of a program that works with HOAs on developing Florida-friendly landscapes in common areas?
Yeah, so thanks, Karen. That's my job in Seminole County. So if you are located in Seminole County, please reach out to me. I'll put my contact information here, so you can send me an email. If you're outside of Seminole County, see if you have a Florida friendly landscaping program. We do have Florida friendly, and I think about 50 something of the 67 counties in Florida. And so they might be willing to work with you. Each county is very different, and so there's no guarantee. But you could also work with your community association manager and your HOA board. Feel free to develop a landscape committee where you can work to learn more and integrate some of these Florida friendly processes into your common areas. That's a great thing to do. So definitely, if you're in Seminole, please reach out to me. If not, try to find your Florida friendly landscaping coordinator or agent in your county and see if they'll work with you.
And Tina, may I just add one quick comment here? And also because the Florida Friendly is a statewide program, and for the state leadership team also develop a program just for homeowner association. So it's a certification program. I will put a link in the chat box. That's also, it's working with your local FFL agents is a great opportunity. And meanwhile, also encourage the homeowner association members to take certain trainings which will understand FFL better.
That's a fantastic point, Elin. Claire Lewis at our state office works with community association managers, and I'm sure she would love to talk with you to try to achieve some goals for your common areas.
Develop a program just for homeowner association. So
Sorry,
it's a certification.
I was trying to send the link on Facebook. I didn't, sorry about my microphone. So it looks like our next question is about software. Do you have any recommended design software?
So we really don't, there's nothing that's like free to my knowledge. We did have another tool, but it's a little outdated at this time. And so I don't really have any specific software that I recommend at this point. When we do this in person, it's very old fashioned. Like I said, we get out the graph paper, we have people bring their surveys. We use pencils and just kind of, drawing it out. And a lot of landscape architects do use software, but they also still heavily rely on sketching things, drawing things, and having that artistic component to it.
Great, thank you so much. Our next question is, can you, it reloaded. Can you talk about, where did Kat's question go? What is the process for a soil test?
Yeah, great question. So what I recommend is going to the University of Florida IFAS Extension Soil Lab. And they have, for about $10, you can get a full soil test. And I'll put the form how to take the test and access that resource in the chat. And that's going to give you a lot of information about your landscape because, let's see, that's the wrong one. So essentially, you're going to get pH, which if you try to fertilize your yard without doing a soil test, I don't really recommend that because your plants might not actually be able to access that information or that fertilizer. So with the soil test, you're going to be able to know that your pH is optimal for the plants that you're selecting. You're going to get micronutrients, macronutrients, and then if you need to change your pH, it'll provide what we call lime requirements. And so those lime requirements might help you to change the pH if necessary for the plants that you already have or that you're looking to select. So it's well worth it. If you think about, you're going to spend hundreds of dollars on plant material, a $10 test from the university, easily achieved by going and scooping some dirt out of your yard. It actually provides instructions here on the form how to do it. You send it right up to the university along with this form. And then, you get those results, and your local extension agent should help you interpret those results if you don't understand them.
Great. Thank you so much for continuing to share resources with us, Tina. I don't know if you want to pop that down into the chat for everyone. We have a couple pretty specific questions. So I apologize if I kind of skip yours, trying to get to some of our broader subjects as we wind down our webinar here. But is there an app where you can input information on your location and get a list of Florida-friendly plants?
So there are some applications. Let me just, there's a few applications from the Florida Friendly office that you can buy or that are free. So here you can see we have some apps. Let me just see here. There is one, I believe it's $1. And with that, you get this, it's essentially the book, but it's in an app form. And you can kind of search and select based on certain criteria, which is, very user friendly. So you're going to look for the plant guide, which is going to be, FFL plant guide. And then you would go to that app. They also have apps on fertilizer ordinances to better understand your ability to fertilize in your area, toxic plants, and so on. So there's a lot of really cool apps. They just put out this Butterfly Gardens app, and I believe they have a bee app coming on the way to plant a bee garden. So a lot of really cool materials here on the website. Check out some of these apps. Some of them I believe are free while others are not. So, check it out. But again, it is similar to the book that we provided.
Great, thank you. It looks like some of our other questions are, can you recommend a trellis or vine native to Florida to use? And as well as questions about colorful shrubs that are appropriate for South Florida.
Yeah, so for vine, it really depends. So Florida's very interesting where we're really quite different as we move through the state. So I'll just pull up this picture here. In South Florida, we are tropical. And so, you can see, I don't know why it's not very good here, the contrast, my apologies, but South Florida is zone 10, zone 9B for our USDA cold hardiness zones. That means their chance of freezing is very low. And so in South Florida, you're going to be able to plant things that are tropical. While you move into Central Florida, it can be a little more spotty based on where you live. And then in North Florida, you don't want to be planting tropicals. So our state is extremely diverse, and it's important to know where you are. And then again, how do your microclimates factor in? So that being said, a couple for Central Florida that we can reliably recommend are coral bean honeysuckle. It's a Florida native. It's very slow growing, but it's a really beautiful plant that's great for pollinators, great for hummingbirds, a beautiful tubular flower. And then we also have our Carolina Jessamine, a very nice, again, slow growing Florida native. It has some beautiful little yellow flowers in the springtime, and it would do well on a trellis. And you could probably get it started in a potted plant for a little while, and then as it becomes robust on that trellis, transplant it into the ground. Because they're so slow growing, the weeds can tend to try to over usurp them. So you want to try to do that. So, but check for your local area. And then the second half to that was
colorful shrubs for South Florida.
So, nothing in particular comes to mind because I have my Rolodex on Central Florida, but again, this guide will help you. So you're going to look for the images of South Florida, as you can see here. It'll have an S by the plant name. And then you're going to look for zones 10A and 10B. So just showing you real quick how to use this guide. It has the images on the left and the outside of the book, essentially. So if we're looking at a small tree or even a shrub, let's see here, getting down to our large shrubs. You can see here on the side. Now we know we're in our large shrubs. We have sweet Acacia, which is suitable for South Florida, zones 9 through 11. You want to think about that max growth, max width of the height and width of the plant, the drainage, if it's suitable for wildlife. So this sweet Acacia is going to be good for birds. And then just kind of going through, here we have some yellow. Maybe you want a pineapple guava, which is more of a red. Maybe that size is not suitable. So again, you just kind of proceed to the next and the next.
And I'll recommend too, I'm in Central Florida. Butterfly pea is a great vine to grow in your yard. The flowers are beautiful in like a cobalt blue to purple, and you can pluck them and make tea with them. So I just thought I'd recommend that too as I look out my window at my butterfly pea that I've got climbing up my fence. So I put everyone in the chat. I know we're reaching the end of our webinar today. If you could, before you leave, please fill out our evaluation. These evaluations not only allow us to understand what type of job we did, but it allows us to help develop content in the future that is more applicable and useful to you. So if you guys could take a look at that link we've put in the chat. We also put the 9 Florida friendly landscaping principles in the chat as a reference for everyone too. So beyond that, I'm looking through our questions, and we do have a couple very specific questions. Tina, I'm not sure if you want to take ones like those, but maybe could you recommend like a ground cover? Looks like there's a couple questions about ground covers maybe that aren't grass that work well in full sun.
Absolutely. So here's your vines section for the person who asked about vines. After the vines, it proceeds to ground covers. You know, we are in the process at the state level of updating this. So it's not, you know, it doesn't include everything, but it does have some great ideas. For a full sun, I really like Perennial Peanut. That's going to be suitable for all throughout the state. It's fairly readily available at your nursery. Maybe not so much at your box store, but if you search around, do a few phone calls, you could probably find Perennial Peanut. You can buy it typically in a 1 gallon, or sometimes they'll sell a flat or a roll of it. And it is one that'll spread. You know, if it's the right plant in the right place, it'll typically start to fill out that area. Very low mow, very low water. Maybe mow once a year probably. Has these cute little yellow flowers. For those of you with shade, I really like Mondo Grass. It can be a little on the pricey side because you have to buy a lot of it. Another one that's not in here for shady areas is river sage. River sage is a great Florida native that really does very well in shady areas as a ground cover. And you know, as we refer to ground covers, it might be 4 to 5 inches, but it might also be, you know, a foot tall. So there's some things in here that, you know, you want to think about that max height, because when we say ground covers, we refer to things that might be also getting a little on the tall side. So, you know, railroad vine, another good one for full sun areas, suitable for coastal areas, suitable for all of Florida. Here we have it. It's in the sweet potato family, and it's quite beautiful. So those are a couple options for you.
Great. Thank you, Tina. What about somebody asked, do the fertilizer ordinances or fertilizer rule not for organic fertilizer?
Great question. So we actually specialize, we kind of offer fertilizer workshops in Seminole County, and our restricted period does allow an exemption for organic composts and manures. Now, if you are close to a water body, such as a stormwater pond or a lake, it's not exempt. So you still have to be careful using those manures around lakes and such. But you can use manures and compost on your turf. We recommend, you know, 1/2 to 3, I think it's actually 1/4 to 1/2 inch over your turf in your landscape beds. You know, a lot of people think our compost and manure are just good for our veggies, but our regular plants really enjoy compost. So think about using it on your landscape beds as well. And typically those are exempt from our fertilizer ordinances. Check with the app, check with your local, you know, extension to be sure.
Great, thank you. And what about, somebody asked, do we need to do pH test on soil purchased from bag stores? Like if you buy potting mix, do you need to do a pH test?
Not typically, unless you're doing such as like a raised bed. You know, if you're planting exclusively in there, you might want to think about it, but typically your compost is going to be in the neutral zone. So unless it's, you know, maybe a questionable sourcing, I really wouldn't worry about it too much, because it's going to be a drop in the bucket, so to speak, in your vast landscape of probably sand. If you're zooming in from Florida, you probably have sand, and it's probably on the lower end of the pH scale. Now, these are very general aspects. We have a diversity of soils in our state, so you should get it tested, but by and large, most of us are sandy. Typically, we're averaging a little on the lower end of the pH scale.
Great. And it looks like our next question is there any change in the landscape guide from 2010 to today?
Yes, so definitely use the virtual PDF that I sent in the chat, because that's going to be a better, more up-to-date version, and we will be hoping to release a new version, I believe later this year or soon.
Great. Well, it looks like we've answered all the questions so far in the chat. But if I did miss anyone, please feel free to send that question again.
I did see one here from Larissa that is about a steep incline downward, so decline, going towards their lake. And so I do recommend a swale and berm or some kind of a rain garden reservoir of plants. That's going to help capture any erosion or fertilizers or debris from going off into your lake. You know, we want to make sure that's really what Florida Friendly is all about, is preventing our, you know, fertilizers and debris, leaf material, erosion from going into our waterways that we love to swim and enjoy and recreate in. And so, yeah, installing a berm right there is a great idea. Definitely recommended that. And if you can't do that with moving the soil, vegetate the area so that you can use Florida natives from this book, Aquatic Plants, to be able to vegetate that soil slope.
Great. And it looks like our last one is that I don't want a mango tree that I just transplanted in the shade in my backyard. How do I control the height without hurting the tree?
I don't know if I fully understand it, but you know, if you don't want a plant, just get rid of it. You know, I like to really say that in this landscape design class, because when we're looking at our site aspects and our site, you know, we're doing that assessment. And if you're saying, okay, I have a really big, you know, aspect of my site that I don't like, and maybe it's a shrub, you know, if it's a large tree, you know, consult your arbor ordinance, because you can't always just get rid of those. But you know, you want to think about maybe if it's a ground cover that you don't really like, get rid of it. You know, you don't have to stay with what's already there. So if this mango tree is not something you desire, and you're trying to grow it in the shade, it's not going to do well. So, you know, post it on Nextdoor or social media and see if somebody wants it, because maybe somebody would love to have a mango tree, you know, and so don't feel bad about sharing plants that you don't necessarily prefer. Let's not share invasive species, so make sure, but mango is not. And you just want to make sure that you're, you know, selecting plants that make you happy and that are suitable with your lifestyle.
She said she just doesn't want the tree to get too tall. So we're talking about pruning the tree, I guess, from the top in a way that won't hurt the tree.
Yeah, so we do recommend pruning fruit trees, but if it's in the shade, it's still not going to be suitable. So mangoes need full sun, and you know, you can prune the tree. We offer pruning classes, but that's not something we're really diving into today.
Steve, I see your question about managing the alfalfa weeds. I'm going to refer you to our electronic data information source. So this is a collection of documents published by University of Florida researchers. And somewhere in there, you should be able in the search bar to look at alfalfa weeds. And there are lots of specific guides about specific weeds and how to manage them, as well as an integrated management guide generally on how to manage weeds. Now, most of the recommendations are chemical, but that is what we kind of the information that we provide. And with that, I think is Spanish Shaw invasive, Tina?
I actually don't know what that is. So I've never heard of that. You know, common names are hard. If you have a binomial or Latin name that could help, because I'm Googling it and it's coming up as a mollusk. So hopefully you don't have a mollusk ground cover. Sorry, I can't help you on that one.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And just a friendly reminder again, as you exit, please make sure to fill out our evaluation to help us better develop content and, help be more assistance in the future. So, bye.
Thank you, everyone. Please do your survey. It really helps us.